Jack, Donald Trump was posting on Truth Social about Canada again last night at 10:53. Big deal announced between the US and Australia this week. Where should we start?
I think people have to understand that these two things are related. I think that President Trump is whipsawing Canada and Australia, and I think he knows exactly what he's doing, because we have two countries that have almost the opposite economies. Canada is a high technology manufacturing nation with enormous resources of natural resources. Australia is a nation with enormous natural resources and no manufacturing economy. So Australia's biggest customer is China. 75% of its export earnings are from China. Canada's largest export customer is the United States. And I believe Canada may be our largest supplier of natural resources to the United States. If you include oil, that's certainly probably true.
Our co-chair, Melissa Sanderson, brought up Australia's deal with the United States and brought up an interesting angle that I hadn't seen covered anywhere else, which is how are the Chinese going to respond to this?
Well, the Chinese are responding in ways that the American press doesn't cover. For example, they are telling the Australians, you know what? We think we should pay you for iron ore, your biggest export to anyone, in our currency rather than dollars. And then you can use those bucket loads of Chinese money to buy Chinese goods, such as maybe cars, things like that. That is a discussion already going on in Australia. And Canada has a situation where it is, I think, aligned with the Western approach to China, which is not to allow China to encroach in the way of ownership or control over any resources or companies in Canada. The United States has the same policy, and Europe is adopting that policy. So the fact is, I wonder what would happen if China approached Canada and said, hey, we'll buy all of the natural resource you can produce and assist you to develop natural resource production if you allow us to pay you in our currency. That would be an interesting approach, wouldn't it? So what I think is that Trump has figured this out. I don't, he's not stupid. And I think that Trump is playing Canada against Australia. That's my opinion. That Canada is stuck. It is a modern manufacturing country. It's interesting, as you know, Tracy, Canada and Australia have the same population. They're also similar in size. Canada is a huge country. Americans don't realize that. Okay, and Australia is a huge country. Canada is loaded with natural resources. Australia is loaded with natural resources. What do both of them lack? Capital to develop those resources. What has Washington got? High-speed printing presses, plenty of ink. They've got a lot of capital, okay? And I believe that the administration is playing Australia versus Canada here.
I think there's a lot of evidence to support what you just said. For instance, we have had several people from the U.S. government reach out to us about attending our critical minerals summit in May, suggesting to me that the U.S. and Canada will be working together more here in the future with regards to critical minerals. But I think your perception here is quite good in that there is definitely some kind of play happening. So let me just throw something else in the mix. Brazil.
Okay. Brazil. Oh, yeah, sure.
Would you not argue that the critical minerals infrastructure we have, both Brazil and Africa, why don't we just discuss that as well?
Okay, let's talk about Brazil. While Washington is thinking about it, the Chinese are all over Brazil. In fact, 2 weeks ago, a huge delegation of Brazilian Brazil government and industrialists visited China at the request of China to discuss Chinese investment in Brazil of the following type. China is offering technology. We will build supply chains for your natural resources in your country. You will produce them. You will pay us with some of those natural resources. And by the way, we'd like to sell you cars, refrigerators, things like that, that you're not making yet in Brazilian companies. Yes, you have foreign companies manufacturing, but we're offering to help create Brazilian high-tech consumer industry. And the Brazilians are very interested in this. This is all going on right now while Washington is thinking, let's see, what am I going to have for breakfast tomorrow? This is right now the focus of this administration, from my point of view as an outsider, is Australia and Canada, playing them off against each other to see where they can get the best deal. And Canada is the most vulnerable because Canada depends on manufactured high-tech goods, cars, planes, things like that, and car parts to the United States. That's as big. Now, here's what I think is happening in Canada, because I don't think Prime Minister Carney is stupid, and I don't think Prime Minister Albanese is stupid. I think, first of all, that they're talking to each other. That's my opinion. The other one is that I believe Prime Minister Carney is in deep conversations with the EU. The EU has much more advanced high-tech manufacturing technology, for example, for using rare earth permanent magnets, making and using them, than the United States has, because that industry never went away from Europe. We abandoned it 25 years ago. They didn't. You take European technology, put it in Quebec, Ontario, Saskatchewan, wherever you like, and Canadian raw materials, and you've got a powerhouse for Europe's consumer economy. Now, again, what does the EU have that Canada doesn't, besides technology? Capital. So what I think is going on is Trump is trying to figure out how to avoid Canada falling into a venture with the EU, which doesn't necessarily need the United States. And I believe he's playing Australia to get Canada back in line. That's my opinion, okay? Because it makes no sense to build mines in Australia 10,000 miles away when you can do it in Canada, which is, let's face it, my Canadian friends are like this. There isn't that much difference between Americans and Canadians in attitude and culture. Okay, Canadian culture is different. I'll give you that. But there's no problem. We're simpatico. Australia, of course, is a wonderful modern place, everything, but it's thousands of miles away. And to develop a mine in Australia, you usually have to build a road and sort of find out where the place is, because Australia is a gigantic, undeveloped country. Canada has the infrastructure. Canada needs capital. Canada has the people in mining. Canada must have 100 times more skilled people in the mining industry than the United States does, even though we have 10 times the population. It's because of the focus, the economic focus. Okay, I really think that if you think that Australia and Canada are isolated situations in the minds of this American administration, you're wrong. They are playing them. And I think that Carney and Albanese must know this, and they're trying to each make the best deal for their own country. Okay, I'm betting that at the end of this, what was the give for you? 8 billion Australian, is that the number?
Yeah, 8.5 billion.
Okay. Well, let's see. What's that? A week's worth of a couple of days of trade between Canada and the United States? What do we buy from Australia and the United States? Kangaroos? I mean, no, I don't think we buy them. Okay. Canada is our biggest trading partner in the hemisphere. Okay. Don't believe for a minute that when Trump says to Premier Ford, we don't want to talk to you anymore. You know what? And he hates the Australian ambassador Rudd because Rudd called him out. So okay, I mean this is childish, and Trump, whatever he is, he's not stupid. He's playing these people. I think Canada has to stand firm, and I think Canada is the winner financially in this. But my opinion, as an American, is that Canada would be much better off with the EU as its primary supporter and customer.
I just want to go back to Brazil for a minute.
Sure.
Brazil's got 212 million population. It's
right.
much more. It's like more significant in population than Canada. I think what's Canada is just under 40 million. And Brazil has initiated a line of very aggressive strategies to get their critical minerals like rare earths into production faster than their competitors. How do they play into this game?
The problem is that even though Brazil does have, 5 times as many people as Canada, Canada is a much richer country. Its consumer economy is probably much bigger than Brazil's. Okay, so Brazil doesn't have at this point the infrastructure. This is what the Chinese are offering them. When they get that infrastructure and they raise the standard of living and the GDP of Brazil, it'll be a powerhouse, no question about it. Right now, they've only discovered the importance of rare earths in Brazil in the last 5 or 6 years. Okay, Canada's been aware of this for a much longer time. Brazil does not have the people it needs to develop these industries. Okay, and they will ultimately have that. Don't get me wrong, but Canada is ready to go, and that's the difference. Now, is Brazil the future of rare earth supply? Most likely, Brazil is our future source of heavy rare earths. No question about that. But don't forget, the largest company in Brazil, Vale, is the largest mining company in the hemisphere. And what do they mine? Iron. Who buys it? China. Okay, so they're not going to listen to the siren songs from Washington or Ottawa or maybe Brussels. They're listening to Beijing, which is flooding them with capital and profits for that iron ore and saying, hey, and by the way, in case you're not aware of it, the fastest growing company in Brazil is China's BYD car company. Okay, and you know what the Chinese are doing also? I found out the other day. They're saying all these closed American and European factories, why don't we reopen them? Brazilian employment, Brazilian products. Of course, we'll have to, we'll invest, so we'll be the owners, or at least 49%. And, China is really operating there because it sees Brazil as its next big source of heavy rare earths. It sees that in Brazil. America looks and says, well, that's a good source of heavy rare earths. And, that beach at Copacabana, that's really nice, we were not, our government in America is not sophisticated enough to identify these situations until it's too late. The Chinese are all over Brazil, okay? And I don't know what's going to happen, but we cannot abandon Canada. That's our best. Canada still today has probably half of the known discoveries of rare earth deposits in the world. Probably half. Okay, it's all over the place in Canada. I also believe the Canadian government is going to finance the development of the rare earth industry in Canada. Canada, by the way, has I don't know if it's operational yet, but there's a very large rare earth separation plant built in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Okay, by the government of the province, not by private industry. Canada makes a great many of the electric motors used in EVs using magnets imported from China. I've always wondered, and I'm calling out the Magna Corporation right now. Why don't you guys make rare earth magnets? You're making the motors, the electric motors. Why not make the magnets? Okay. So I think there's a real bright future for Canada, and I don't think it depends on the United States. That's the problem with the United States.
Well, what you just mentioned about magnets, Vacuum Schmelz, American, building an American magnet plant, just announced a deal with Cyclic Materials, which is a Canadian company, which will be doing recycling for feedstock for them. So I just want to jump to money now. In all the years, I mean, as we've been discussing, a couple of our headlines this week have been about follow the money. Cash is finally on the table for the critical minerals. But the decision makers deciding where that cash is going should be quite, well, nothing short of a comedy, if you ask me, Jack. So we have 1.5 trillion being announced to be invested into critical mineral infrastructure from JP Morgan. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I find that a little hard to swallow since I don't think JP Morgan's capitalization is 1.5 trillion. So I doubt that they're pledging their future of their company to this. I think what JP Morgan is really telling us is that's the bill to get America straightened out, 1.5 trillion. Now, in any nation but the United States, that would be a joke. It couldn't be done. It could not be done. Okay? Here, of course, our government probably spends that more than that in a few months. And I think it's I don't know where they came up with that estimate, but I don't buy into it. I keep telling people the United States could be completely secure and in sufficient amounts of critical minerals, everyone it needs for a few $billion, a few billion. If the United States were to spend on critical mineral integrated supply chain development what has been pissed away in California on the railroad to nowhere, which is something like tens of billions of dollars, we would be completely independent at this point. So it's not about lack of capital, it's lack of proper use of that capital. That is the real problem. Okay, I don't know what to tell you, but I don't understand how Washington analyzes anything, because it is so obvious to me and my colleagues what needs to be done here, and nobody listens. Okay, so it would be nice, maybe one day we can do a discussion of what exactly would Jack Lifton do to solve the problem of the United States in securing sufficient supplies of critical materials. I'd love to discuss that with somebody in Washington, but they don't want to listen. Is anybody in Ottawa interested? Anybody in Brussels? Well, you'll probably cut this, but I'm going to tell you something. I'm already talking to Brussels. That's why I know so much about it.
Well, just FYI, we're happy to do that in a consequent interview with you. And for everybody out there who wants to learn more, please go to the criticalmineralsinstitute.com. We publish all of our board of directors. Jack is based in Detroit, everywhere from Perth, Australia. We have Australians on our board, Canadians, and of course, we publish everything on the media platform, investornews.com. Thank you, Jack.